Caitlyn is getting buffed. Can bot laners ever catch a break? Hey Summoners, welcome back to another Pro Guides Patch Rundown. My name is Dan, and I'm going to run you through every change you need to know about for patch 10.15. This is another juicy patch as we start heading towards Worlds, and we're getting ready for the next big meta to develop. Aside from covering every change, we're also going to give you guys tier lists to use for every single role. These lists have been compiled by our in-house analysts and should give you an idea of which champions you should be looking to play or maybe even ban. Do me a quick favor though and answer our question of the day. What's motivating you to play League right now? Personally, I enjoy winning those clutch 1v1s. While League feels like it focuses heavily on macro and team play, I still live for outplaying my direct opponents and asserting my dominance. But let me know your answers in the comments below. Alright, with that all out of the way, let's run you guys through all those changes. Of course, we have to start with everyone's favorite section, the skins. Spirit Blossom, Teemo, Thresh, Vayne, Yasuo, and Lilia have joined the skin shop this patch. You'll also be able to unlock a Prestige Edition for Spirit Blossom Teemo, so get ready to grind, boys and girls. I definitely suggest giving these skins a look. They look beautiful, and it might be time to repurchase some more RP. Next, let's talk about systems. First up is a nerf to Unsealed Spellbook. Its initial cooldown is going up from 240 to 300, and each unique swap now reduces the cooldown a little bit more now, in 25 instead of 20 seconds. Even with this second change, this is still a nerf. After cycling through spells to max out the cooldown reduction, you're still going to end up with a 30-second longer cooldown than before. The extra minute you have to wait at the beginning is also a pretty big deal. League is a game decided by seconds, but when we're talking about a whole minute, you know that this is a pretty big change. Unsealed Spellbook has actually been overperforming in spite of a low pick rate. It's one of those sleeper OP runes, and Riot has decided to crack down on it as we approach Worlds. Next up are buffs to the Spellthief's Edge item line. Spellthief's Edge mana regeneration has been increased from 20 to 50%, Frostfang's mana regeneration from 50 to 75%, and Shard of True Ice's AP from 45 to 50. Most solo queue players might not feel like these buffs are necessary. However, in competitive play, the Relic Shield start vastly overtakes the Spellthief's start. Spellthief's feels way too risky to take when playing in competitive games. If the bot lane gets camped by a jungler and a mid laner, or even the entire goon squad, it's just not feasible for support players to utilize Spellthief's passive effects. If you can't farm up gold, you can't upgrade Spellthief's to a Frostfang. If you can't do that, there's where the issue lies. You won't have wards. No wards is basically a go next, especially in elite levels of play, and even more so in competitive play. Trinkets alone don't suffice for the amount of vision you need to make calculated plays. In competitive play, a lot of ranged supports still opt into the basic Relic Shield start, meaning that this item is clearly a little too weak. By buffing it up, players should be more incentivized to take risks. Alright, let's start running you guys through those champion changes next. The first top lane change we want to run you guys through is a nerf to tank Fiddlesticks. We see this build used typically in solo lanes, but it's definitely a rather uncommon niche pick. In spite of this, the healing from minions on Fiddlestick's W has gone down from 25% to 15%. His sustain is a bit excessive and makes him pretty oppressive to play against. The build will still feel viable, but the laning phase is going to be tougher for players. While we didn't include Tank Fiddlesticks top in our tier list because of a very low play rate, we'll place him now since Riot has gone out of their way to specifically make a balance change aimed towards him. Fiddlesticks top is placed in our A tier for this patch. He's a great draft mix-up that brings solid crowd control to the table as well. Next up is a nerf to Ornn. His armor has been reduced from 36 to 33. Ornn has been a dominant pick in competitive play, not because he's oppressive. Instead, it's because he's too safe and too reliable. He can easily engage from afar and soak up some damage in the mid to late game no matter what the situation. Ornn also enables all of his teammates to scale a little bit harder since he gains the ability to upgrade allies' items starting at level 13. Let's not forget that he also upgrades up to 2 of his own items at level 13. It's a pretty crazy power spike for him as well. As long as he can sit back and farm, Ornn is way too safe to not pick in a competitive setting. By lowering his armor, bullying him out and finding solo kills should be a little bit easier than before. For solo queue purposes, however, we still don't think he's anything to worry about too much, so he'll remain in the B tier. Okay, we finally got buffs, starting with Shen. Shen's passive shield value has gone up from 50 to 101 to 70 to 121. That's 20 more shield at all stages of the game, a gigantic value in the early game, and a decent one later on. Shen is able to reduce the cooldown of his passive significantly in the late game, so it's a lot bigger of a buff than it even appears on paper. The reason that this buff is warranted at all is because Shen doesn't hit a level 6 power spike. He uses his ultimate to assist his allies, but that leaves him out to dry in the top lane, where champions like Aurelia, Darius, Garen, okay, let's just say literally everyone else, gains a massive power spike with their ultimate abilities. Shen was already doing fine, but we believe that this buff should bring him back into the S tier. Make sure to check out our mid-patch update next week though. We'll keep you guys updated on the effects of all these changes, as well as the one we go over later in the video. Finally, Aurelia has also been buffed. The attack speed bonus per stack on her passive has gone up from 8 to 12% to 8 to 16%. I know a lot of you guys probably aren't happy that she's been buffed, but let me pull out the good old data for you. She ended last patch with a 46% win rate overall and just below a 47% win rate in high elo. That's really low. And from a purely statistical point of view, it's obvious that Aurelia is a bit on the weaker side. I personally think she's a champion who should sit below a 50% win rate if we want a healthy game, but 3 to 4% below is definitely too much. Aurelia's dominance and ability to take over games makes balancing her pretty difficult, but since this buff only targets her late game, it likely won't make her broken overnight. We'll keep her in the A tier for now. For the top lane, the OP pick right now is Darius. His 51% win rate, #1 top lane pick rate, and 44% ban rate in high elo says a lot. Across all ranks, this ban rate climbs even higher, sitting just below 50%. If half the player base is going to ban him, something is up. While Darius might not be a pick we see often in competitive play, it's obvious that he's one of the best, if not the best champion to use in solo queue. He snowballs ridiculously hard and makes the laning phase no fun at all for his opponents. Our S tier, however, consists of Fiora, Garen, Volibear, Kled, Jax, Urgot, Nasus, Singed, Maokai, Camille, and Shen. Anyone that missed our mid-patch update should know that we moved Camille up into the S tier. She's been seeing a ton of success in the top lane, especially in high elo. Her mobility, unique playstyle, and high damage output, including some true damage, merits her as one of the best carries in the game. Alright, that covers the top lane, so let's run through the jungle changes next. Of course, the most important change in the jungle this patch is that Lilia is now in the game. We have a champion spotlight running you guys through everything you need to know about her, and our team has put a ton of effort into making that video. So if you want to know more about Lilia, I heavily suggest that you guys go ahead and check it out. Since she's a new champion, we're going to hold off on rating her, but we'll give you guys an update next week in our mid-patch update. Skarner is the next pick we want to talk about, and he's gotten a ton of changes. His Q now deals 15% of his total AD and 1 to 3% of his target's maximum health, as opposed to dealing 33 to 45% of his total AD. When empowered, it also has a similar ratio of 15% of his total AD, 1 to 3% of his target's maximum health, and also 30% of his AP as damage. Next, his Q's empowered buff duration has gone up from 4 to 5 seconds, and the mana cost now costs 15 flat rather than scaling up with level. Finally, his E no longer slows down after hitting a target. These changes are massive, and things look pretty promising for Skarner players. He now has a better answer to Juggernauts, tanks, and bruisers, and the buff to his E is massive. If it passed through units, it got so slow that it basically became impossible for enemies not to dodge it, even if they were running away in a straight line. We've gone ahead and moved Skarner into the A tier because these buffs are massive. Another buff we expect to see in the jungle is Gragas. His W's AP ratio has gone up from 50 to 60%, and his ultimate's AP ratio from 70 to 80%. AP Gragas players are rejoicing as they hear this. Riot wants to lift up AP Gragas. I guess someone on the balanced teams wants to see some glorious one-shots in competitive play. Gragas' 45% win rate overall merits this buff, but it wasn't necessarily the one we all saw coming. For now, he'll remain in the B tier, but these buffs do look pretty promising. Finally, we have a well-needed nerf to Lee Sin. He's been a staple pick in competitive play as well as high elo solo queue for a little too long. His W's cooldown has been increased from 12 to 14 seconds, but this is a bigger nerf to ward hopping and jumping to minions than it is to his jungle clear, self-shielding, or attempts to shield allies. While he won't deal any less damage than before, he's going to feel a little bit riskier to play now. Lee Sin will remain in the S tier for now, but this rating definitely holds a lot of weight towards high elo Lee Sin. The jungle's OP picks this patch are Karthus and Kha'Zix. While he might not be objectively overpowered, Kha'Zix is a solo queue monster. He thrives off of mistakes, and most players just can't on my team. His ultimate deals so much damage, and escaping with a sliver of health isn't enough. You have to be extremely careful not to overcommit when playing against Karthus, and it honestly changes the way players have to play the game. He was moved back into the S tier last patch because of the buffs he received to push him back into the mid lane. Karthus got his movement speed back, and he has been destroying in the jungle as well as the mid lane ever since. The jungle's S tier consists of Fiddlesticks, Volibear, Nunu, Lee Sin, Rek'Sai, Shaco, Elise, Warwick, Kayn, Evelynn, Nidalee, Wukong, Zac, and Graves. Now let's run through the mid lane. The first mid lane change we want to go over is Twisted Fate. He's actually been too strong, and well, a lot of us knew that since he was in our S tier. Spoiler alert with the was, because he is now A tier. Twisted Fate's W cooldown has gone up from 6 flat to 8 to 6 based on ability level. This is pretty big because Twisted Fate players usually don't max W until a little later into the game. 2 more seconds on the ability means that they'll have less blue cards and thus less mana. Situationally, this is also a pretty big nerf for early game skirmishes and duels because he'll have to wait another 2 seconds before he can pull out a second gold card. You get the idea, and he's definitely noticeably weaker now. Next up are changes to Swain. We've been anticipating these changes for a while now, and they're finally here. His movement speed has been reduced from 335 to 325, and his passive's cooldown has changed from 12 to 6 to 10 seconds flat, but will now scale with cooldown reduction. His passive's mana restore is gone, and his Q cooldown was buffed from 10 to 4 seconds to 9 to 3 seconds. It also fires in a narrower cone, but the bolts will pass through enemy champions. Also, Swain's W's range has been increased from 310. Finally, Swain's E cooldown went down from 13 to 9 to 10 seconds flat, and the mana cost reduced from 60 to 80 to 50 flat. These are massive buffs alongside a couple of minor nerfs. This is essentially a mini rework with all the changes, and we have very little data to go off of anyway, so we're leaving Swain unranked this week, but we'll keep you guys updated next week. For reference, across all servers and all ranks, Swain had less than 80,000 games played last patch. In high elo, he had less than 8,000, and again, this was across all servers. With a rather short mid lane change list, let's head over to the tier list. In our S tier, we have Fizz, Vladimir, Zed, Talon, Kassadin, Katarina, Echo, Diana, Sylas, Galio, Annie, Nocturne, and Karthus. Yes, Karthus mid lane is also finding a ton of success. While players prefer to pick him in the jungle, he's a much more popular mid lane pick than before and ended the last patch with just short of a 53% win rate. One single patch has led him to popping off and finding success once again. It's a Season 2 throwback! Zed and Talon especially look quite promising with the presence of Karthus as well as other AP junglers becoming more popular. Having AP picks across other roles allows these two AD assassins to thrive, since picking them doesn't mess up damage splits as much as they did before. Next, let's head into the bottom lane. For the 100th patch in a row, Aphelios has been nerfed. The startup on his turrets has gone up from 0.25 to 0.35 seconds, and their range reduced from 575 to 500. While the turret startup time is a nerf, that one isn't too big. What is big is the range reduction. 575 to 500 is a huge deal, guys. 550 is the baseline for most marksmen, so now the turrets won't outrange most of them. In fact, it's the other way around now. Marksmen will be able to safely remove Aphelios' turrets, so they'll have to be used as team fighting tools instead now, except when playing against extremely low-range marksmen like Lucian or Sivir. Also, his Infernum Hurricane bolts no longer damage enemies they pass through. This will cut down on Aphelios' ridiculous team fighting power, and hopefully put an end to the 200 years meme. But who am I kidding here? We love memes. Aphelios is going down to the A tier in response to this nerf. Finally, Caitlyn has also been buffed. Her base AD went from 62 to 64, and her movement speed from 325 to 330. These are big buffs because they're to Caitlyn specifically. Base AD on Caitlyn is terrifying. She's the bully you didn't want to ever see on the playground, and now she's even scarier than before. Adding 5 more movement speed, Varus nerfs hit the live server. Her immense utility, high damage output, and crowd control make her the champion that can basically do it all. While Ashe is immobile, she has better than average self-peeling because she's able to slow enemies with her basic attacks, and because she always shoots out a point-blank ultimate for a brief stun for a momentary chance to catch a breath and reposition. Our S tier for the bottom lane consists of Vayne, Caitlyn, Jinx, Jhin, Draven, Kai'Sa, and Ezreal. While Ezreal did get hit with a massive nerf, he's still seeing tons of play and finding a decent amount of success. His damage wasn't touched, so Ezreal players at least have that much to be thankful for. Draven is also seeing a ton of success as well. The bottom lane meta revolves heavily around who the dominant lane bullies are, and Draven is one of them. His incredible early game damage makes him one of the most oppressive champions to play against, especially when he's partnered up with a support that has lockdown. Okay, that covers the bottom lane changes, so let's wrap it all up with supports. Kicking off the support changes is Thresh. His W's cooldown has gone up from 22 to 12 to 22 to 16. In lower elo, our analysts predict that this won't affect his win rate by much at all. We all know the pain of our teammates not taking our lanterns, but I'm sure this happens much more often in low elo. In high elo, there's no way Thresh doesn't remain a relevant pick because of how incredibly powerful his entire kit is. However, a higher cooldown will definitely hurt, especially in the late game where a single pick can decide the course of games. It's definitely going to suck when Thresh players won't be able to bail an ally out because they just used their lantern and there's 2 more seconds for it to come back up. This nerf isn't enough to push Thresh out of the S tier, but we do believe that some players might start maxing E second rather than W. Yuumi has received a buff this patch on the contrary. She was gutted with her last set of nerfs, and now she's getting some well-needed love. Yuumi's E now costs a flat percentage of her maximum mana, so it seems only right that Riot has decided to give her the following buff. Her passive's mana restore has been increased from 50 to 150 to 25 to 100, but our analysts are definitely going to keep tabs on her specifically headed into next week.
Lastly, for supports, we have some very minor buffs coming for Rakan. The Balanced team have stated that they want to make his progression have its cooldown change from 40 to 14.5 seconds depending on level. This is a very minor buff and will not affect his standings on our tier list.
For supports, the OP pick is Lulu. She's essentially filling in the very tiny shoes Yuumi left behind after getting nerfed. While her overall statistics might just indicate that she's S tier, high elo players have been placing a ton of emphasis on her. She ended up as the 2nd most played support as well as the 3rd most banned one. The first 2 were Yuumi and Morgana, by the way, so in a sense, you can actually give Lulu the gold medal here. People still hate Yuumi because of her design, and people hate Morgana because she's a buzzkill. We want to make big plays, and then Morgana presses E and it's just not fun to play against. Then comes in Lulu, who's basically Yuumi except designed way back in Season 2. The support S tier consists of Blitz, Senna, Soraka, Bard, Thresh, Nautilus, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Leona, and Alistar. There haven't been many support changes recently, and these same champions definitely still feel extremely powerful. We have, however, moved Swain and left him unranked, just like in the mid lane. He looks extremely promising as a support, however, and our analysts do think he'll pop off as either an A or S tier pick. Swain has been dominating low elo especially, and we think he'll become the next 1v9 support superstar. That concludes our patch 10.15 rundown. Thanks again for watching, and make sure to check out ProGuides.com as we have a bunch of resources aimed at helping you guys improve. We're always updating our content there, as well as on our YouTube channel, so make sure you connect with us by subscribing. Until next time though, I wish you guys all the best of luck out in Summoner's Rift.